When given the opportunity to revive The Thing for Universal Pictures, producers Marc and Eric Newman chose to craft a prequel to the 1982 John Carpenter movie. Unfortunately, this new version of The Thing turned out to be a box office disappointment, just like Carpenter's had been. It also managed to disappoint fans of the Carpenter film and the members of its own special effects team when the impressive practical effects that had been put to use on set were completely covered over by unconvincing CGI effects in post-production. There are some interesting decisions made behind the scenes of The Thing 2011, but also some very poor ones. So let's look back 10 years and find out what the happened to this horror movie. The Thing 2011 exists because of Dawn of the Dead 2004. That remake of George A. Romero's 1978 classic was produced by Marc and Eric Newman, and when Universal Pictures released the film, it earned more than $100 million at the global box office. So it's no surprise Universal wanted to stay in the Abraham-Newman remake business after that. There's conflicting information on how exactly the producers got involved with the new version of The Thing. In some interviews, it was said they chose the project after looking through Universal's library of titles. But on the audio commentary, Newman says Universal brought the project to them and asked them to revive The Thing in some way. Whatever the case, the duo knew very early on that they did not want their take on The Thing to be a remake. They knew there was no way they could make something better than what Carpenter had done. Instead, they decided to make something that could be seen as a complementary companion to the Carpenter movie. They decided to make a prequel. It's quite interesting they felt The Thing was an untouchable film when they had just produced a remake of Dawn of the Dead, which many horror fans would argue is also an untouchable film. There could have been some extra hesitancy to produce a remake in this case because Carpenter's The Thing had already been a remake itself of 1951's The Thing from Another World. And who wants to say they made a remake of a remake? Then again, since the source material for all of these Thing projects is a 1938 novella written by John W. Campbell, there are some who wouldn't use the term remake for Carpenter's film at all. They would prefer to say that it's another adaptation of the Campbell story, not a remake of The Thing from Another World. I want to thank you guys for watching What the Happened to This Horror Movie, and ask that if you enjoy our shows, please subscribe to our channel right now, like this video, and click on the bell so you can be notified each time a new video goes up. And now, back to the show. You don't have to worry about arguing semantics for the 2011 movie. It is a prequel that leads directly into the events of the Carpenter Thing. In the 1982 film, the alien creature arrives, in the form of a dog, at an American outpost in Antarctica after it has already decimated a Norwegian outpost not far away. It has been burned out and it appears that everyone is dead. There's a fire axe stuck in the wall, a frozen corpse of a man who slit his own wrists and throat, and nobody else around. Carpenter and screenwriter Bill Lancaster had already set up the prequel very well. Abraham and Newman just had to figure out how to fill in the blanks. Ronald D. Moore, best known for his work in the worlds of Star Trek and Battlestar Galactica, was the first writer hired for The Thing 2011. Moore was the one involved when they had to feel their way through some really bad early ideas. Figuring out who the lead character would be was a challenge, because Russell's performance had been so iconic that they had to be careful not to focus on someone who could be unfavorably compared to him. A male scientist who would have been presented in what they described as a wimpy manner was also out. The decision was made to set the lead apart by making the character female. Since there had not been any female characters in Carpenter's film, this eliminated the problem of a direct comparison. As the development of The Thing went on, Moore fulfilled his contract, and Eric Heiserer was brought in to work on the script, making this the third high-profile horror franchise he had worked on in a row around this time. Heiserer also wrote Final Destination 5 and the remake of A Nightmare on Elm Street. The rewrite he performed on this project was substantial enough that he is the sole credited writer on the finished film, although Scott Frank was brought on to do an uncredited polish, just as he had done on Dawn of the Dead 2004. And like Zack Snyder, who made his feature directorial debut on Dawn of the Dead, The Thing also marked the feature debut of a director who had been working in commercials and music videos up to that point. Interestingly, Heiningen was only available to make The Thing because the film he had signed on to direct the previous year had fallen apart due to the Great Recession. And that project had been Army of the Dead, the zombie movie that was being produced and co-written by Zack Snyder. Army of the Dead wouldn't end up being made until a decade later, with Snyder at the helm for Netflix. But in 2008, it got very close to happening with Heiningen at Warner Brothers. After Warner decided Army of the Dead was too expensive, Heiningen went looking for another job. Snyder introduced him to Eric Newman, and he got hired for The Thing. the most admirable element of the prequel is the dedication Heiningen, Heiserer, and the crew showed to make sure their film would match up to what Carpenter had shown of the Norwegian camp in his film. Heiserer made sure to show the alien escaping from the block of ice. He shows who put the fire axe into the wall and why. He introduces us to the man who will end up slashing his wrist and throat. Still frames from the movie, along with maps that were already available online, were used to recreate the layout of the Norwegian camp as shown in 1982. With the height of Kurt Russell and how he looked in the rooms, he passed through being used as a guide for the construction of the rooms in the 2011 movie. The effort to match up the earlier film extended to a shooting location, as some of the snowy exteriors were filmed in Cumberland, British Columbia, not far from where the cast and crew of the 82 film had been set up in Stewart, BC. But while Carpenter was blessed with the opportunity of having his outpost set built in true isolation in an area of Alaska that was about a 30-mile drive from Stewart, the prequel had to stay closer to civilization. The outpost for this one was built in a mine pit near Toronto, Ontario. Only half of the characters who populate the outpost in the film are Norwegian, because of course Universal wasn't going to release a film that was entirely populated by Norwegians speaking their first language. The 8 Norwegians are joined by Danish, English, and French characters, plus 5 Americans, including the lead. Since the characters are from all over the place, they default into speaking English with each other, and only one person at the outpost doesn't speak English. The lead is Kate Lloyd, a vertebrate paleontologist who is brought to the outpost by antagonistic scientist Dr. Sander Halvorsen after the discovery of the spacecraft and the frozen alien. Played by Mary Elizabeth Winstead, she's not only the audience surrogate character that we follow through this crazy situation, she's also the most observant and sensible person of the bunch, and turns out to be a capable heroine. The casting of Halvorsen was one of the bigger issues to arise during production, as Norwegian actor Dennis Storhoy, who was initially hired to play the role, was replaced by Danish actor Ulrich Thomsen after a week of filming. Some sources say Storhoy was fired due to personal issues, while Storhoy himself said that he chose to leave the production. This switch-up required some digital effects work in post, as Thompson's face was put on Storhoy's body for scenes that had already been shot with the other actor. Although The Thing 2011 turned out to be a decent film, and the material was certainly handled with respect, the film does come up short in comparison to the Carpenter Thing in the way the producers always seemed to know it would. That's why they made it a prequel instead of a remake in the first place. The writing isn't as good as the script Bill Lancaster wrote for the Carpenter movie. It can't achieve the level of suspense and paranoia the 82 film had, and instead of building a feeling of dread, it increases the amount of action, showing off alien attack sequences that aren't as impressive as what Carpenter showed nearly 30 years earlier. But the prequel's greatest downfall is its presentation of the alien. The film was following, or technically leading into, a movie that is filled with some of the most awe-inspiring practical effects ever put on film. The work Rob Bottin did on The Thing was incredible. During the production of the prequel, the correct decision was made to have the effects artist from Amalgamated Dynamics on set to bring the monstrous alien shapeshifter to life through practical effects. There was always the thought in mind that the creature would receive slight CG enhancements in post, but as the movie was being filmed, the actors had the opportunity to interact with animatronic monsters. Sadly, the studio ended up deciding that the practical effects needed to be completely covered up with a layer of CGI, and they apparently made this decision after some misguided audience members at test screenings made negative comments about the effects. The designs created by Amalgamated Dynamics remained. The animatronics and puppets were just replaced by CGI versions of the exact same creature. So it was like the effects artists never needed to be on set at all. Effects supervisor Alec Gillis was so depressed to see all of their practical work tossed aside, he wrote and directed his own creature feature called Harbinger down a few years later as a way to try to get over the disappointment of The Thing. For his part, Heiningen seemed quite willing to have the practical effects replaced by CGI effects. On the commentary, he and Newman said the replacement was necessary because the effects team didn't have enough prep time. Bottin had a year to work on the effects for the previous Thing, they said, while Amalgamated Dynamics only had a few months to get ready for this one. Heiningen said the creatures required more articulation than the puppets had, that they couldn't do much with the practical stuff. In one interview, he even said the practical effects made The Thing 2011 look like an 80s movie. And he said this as a negative, even though the film is set in the 80s, and its entire purpose was to emulate an 80s classic. He felt the CGI effects made the film more accessible to the modern audience. Universal also demanded the end of the film be reshot. The original cut involved Kate entering the spacecraft to find the corpses of multiple aliens that had died from their contact with the Thing. She was then attacked by the Thing in the form of an alien that had no human element to it at all, meant to be a copy of the spaceship's pilot. The studio didn't like that, and viewers in the test screenings were reportedly confused. They didn't know what this creature was supposed to be. Since Kate and Halvorsen had been butting heads throughout the movie, Universal wanted the final creature she encounters to have Halvorsen's face on it. So in the version of the film that was released, Kate's climatic confrontation is with the Halvorsen monster, which Heineken admits looks like it was created at the last minute, since it was. CG enhancements were also added to the interior of the spaceship to cover up the alien corpses, which were taken out of the movie entirely. All of this tinkering was done in an attempt to turn The Thing 2011 into more of a crowd pleaser, but it didn't do much good in the long run. The general audience didn't seem to be very interested in this project. Made on a budget of $38 million, it earned just $31.5 at the global box office. The failure of The Thing 2011 shouldn't be put on the shoulders of Heineken. His work here is effective enough and shows enough promise that it should have led to more feature work. But 9 years would pass before the director made another movie. This may have been his own choice. Unsourced online trivia claims that he found working on The Thing to be a negative experience due to studio interference, so he has purposely avoided working with Hollywood studios since then. His 2020 film, The Forgotten Battle, was a Dutch and Belgian production. If Heineken was disenchanted by his experience working on The Thing, he is a great grin-and-bear-it team player, because there's no hint of disappointment in the press he did for the film at the time of its release or on the audio commentary. However Heineken felt about his film at the end of the day, it has gained some fans over the years. Still, a lot of viewers who enjoy it in its current state would like to see the movie the way it was before all the CG additions, and before the ending was reshot. There have been release the Amalgamated Dynamics cut, and release the pilot version movements, but Universal doesn't seem to be paying attention, yet. 10 years have gone by, but there's still hope that someday we'll get a special edition release that will remove the CGI from those monsters the effects team brought to the set. Thank you for watching our show. If you like what you see, please subscribe to our JoBlo Horror Videos channel. Tell your friends you like this sort of content and turn on the bell to receive notifications for all our latest videos. We're an independent company and we appreciate all of your support.